Thank you.
Hi, this is Stephanie Gunning, and we're here for another author, writer interview. I'm being joined by Kadar Lewis, Ed.D. Actually, it's Ed.D. It's Doctor of Education, who is an author, an educator, and an educational leader dedicated to enriching the world with life skills and leadership education that helps youth and adults succeed at their highest levels. Currently, he serves the Los Angeles, California, Las Vegas, Nevada communities as the Vice President of Programs and the Interim Chief Operating Officer for the Fulfillment Fund Los Angeles and the Fulfillment Fund Las Vegas, respectively, helping thousands of low-income first-generation college students of color each year take steps to make college a reality. Prior to that, he served the Magic Johnson Foundation, and he was the director of the foundation's Taylor Michaels Scholarship Program. Under his leadership, TMSP was awarded the 2012 FastWeb.com National Scholarship Providers Association Scholarship Provider of the Year Award for helping hundreds of high-achieving minority students persist toward and complete their undergraduate degrees. He began his career as an elementary and middle school teacher. He taught in a charter school in Los Angeles, joined the Inner City Education Foundation's leadership team. He helped grow it from 2 to 7 charters, and he himself is a first-generation college graduate. He grew up in a low-income single-parent household where education was always prioritized by his mother. He then received generous scholarships, went to in Los Angeles to private elementary and secondary schools. Then he matriculated to Harvard University, and he got a bachelor's degree in philosophy of all things. And then it's sort of like my friends who got like degrees in ancient Greek studies. And he's a little bit better actually. While working full time, he then earned a master's degree in education in technology, leadership, and instructional design. And in 2016, he got his doctorate from Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, completing his dissertation on the college to career transition for an African-American male Division I revenue generating student athlete, quite a specific audience. And now he lives in LA with his family, his wife, and his 2 sons. So thank you so much for joining us to talk today about your book, The New Grad's Guide to Workplace Success, How to Learn, Grow, and Prosper Early in Your Career. So there you are.
My pleasure. Thanks.
I have to say, when I read your bio, I find it incredibly impressive. It shows how persistence, through one's life, kind of one thing leads to the next decision and the next decision. And I feel like your book is doing that for its target reader. Who is your target reader?
Yeah, I hope so, Stephanie. That's the idea. The target reader, really the core audience is that maybe 21-year-old, 22-year-old, someone who is finishing college, about to enter the workforce, or up to someone who is maybe in their mid-20s or later 20s, still maybe coming off of grad school, about to get into the workforce, get your real, first time serious job, which is on the path that you have taken for your career. Really someone who's trying to be successful right from the start.
Yeah. And it seems to me that the book is more oriented towards people who are going into a corporate environment, or it could be a nonprofit also, but a hierarchically structured organization. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I mean, in part that's true. I think in general, most people will end up working on teams, either in small or big companies.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, as an educator, that my experience has been in the nonprofit for the most part. So I'm definitely speaking to both audiences, for-profit and nonprofit professionals. But also, I think that this book is for anyone who's just going to be working, because I think there's a lot to take away from it. Whether you're even working maybe in a startup environment, maybe in something that's less structured, maybe you're working even as an artist, someone on your own who's going to be freelancing or kind of working independently, contracting your services, there's definitely some wisdom and some knowledge that I put in the book for everybody.
Yeah, I remember being that age and being absolutely terrified of graduation day because I did not know what I was going to do. And I knew I had to make a resume, and that was about as far as my picture went. I thought, oh, publishing would be nice, or, I thought I was going to write a great novel, and, but I didn't. It was a shock to my system also the first week that I had my job.
Sure.
And I remember going to the office, and the day kind of came at me, the first couple of days, it was like people I didn't know coming at me, the phone ringing, write a memo. What the heck is a memo? I thought, why would I do that?
Right. There's a whole, people coming in from, human resources, sign this, here's your insurance, or here's here's your keys, here's all the different ins and outs of the office. And it is different that even compared to internships, because I imagine many of the people reading my book will have had an internship or two, and certainly have had success along the way. But what the book is about is helping folks, new professionals, get oriented in the workforce and in their new place of business, wherever they're going to be working. And so to your point about, hey, how do you write this memo? What does all this mean? All this new information is coming at me. The book provides sort of methods to find the answers. Not necessarily the answers themselves, although there are some guidelines and tips that are kind of universal about like communication, for example. But really, how do you respond in the new environment? So imagine you talked about going into the workforce. Well, what people can relate to who haven't read the book, your first day of college, or your first day of high school even, but let's just say your first day of college, you had a new environment, you had new people around you, you had things you had a new culture that you needed to adjust to, and a new level that you needed to rise to. And so really the book is about providing some ideas and helpful hints, tips, practical guidance, encouragement to be successful in the work environment.
Yeah, I like the way you said that, to encourage people. It does have a coaching element to it, the way it's structured. You give a lot of really good questions that the reader can ask themselves. Just to point out a few things. So some have to do with the current job that they're in, but some also have to do with the big picture, like looking ahead. How does this help you get to the next place? So like chapter 3, for instance, constantly improve your professional skills. And so your questions that you begin with is, what skills helped me land this job? I think that's a really amazing question, because
thank you.
Even as an entrepreneur, every time I get a client, that's a great question to ask myself, because it helps me know what somebody needed that they thought that I possessed or could learn to do for them, right? What skills must I develop to succeed in this role, right? So the other thing that question helps do is help you to understand how your supervisor is thinking, right? And what's needed by the company. So then you ask, which skills are the company helping me develop, and which must I develop on my own? Right? So that's very empowering, because if you had an employer that didn't want to train you, you could still train yourself.
Absolutely. So part of this is framing the power dynamic of your career path. So obviously, we're showing up at work. There's a hierarchy. There's things that the job needs to provide to you, both legally and sort of philosophically, based on their framework and how they look at their staff and their productivity. But to your point about connecting the current job a reader is in or starting versus with their long-term plan, you need to, the idea is to take the power back in terms of deciphering, okay, first let me understand what's my big picture. Why am I here? What do I need to do to be successful? But what do I need to do to get the most out of this experience for my own personal success. And that's what I mean with the power. So having a balance of power, not going into a workplace where you think, okay, well, I'm just here to like make money and serve the company, and then that's it. But thinking about yourself long term, how you're going to benefit as well, and then making a plan to do that. So these framing questions that you mentioned, I've tried to start each chapter with framing questions to get the reader thinking about their own agency in the process. So taking their own responsibility and their own power in becoming the strongest professional possible.
I think that's great. Yeah, so you begin with the questions and then you go to a concept summary. And I think of that as like the meat and potatoes of your chapter, where you really break it down and explain it. What were you trying to accomplish with that part of each chapter?
Sure. So the concept summaries really want to get deep quickly into the heart of what each chapter is trying to convey. That's the concept summaries are really just that, like my summary on the specific topic. So whether it's how to get the most out of your new experience, how to understand constantly improving your skills, thinking like a leader. This is my take, maybe on average a couple pages or more on really what the concept means. And so providing a perspective both from my own experiences as a professional, having built this career that I've participated in for over 15 years. And on top of that, my perspective as an educator in working with young adults and helping them be successful to transition.
That's the thing. I think your skill as an educator had helped you to structure this effectively. I really think you're a good teacher and a good coach in this book. Yeah. So after that, you have like take these action steps, and there's usually like 3 to 5 things that the person can do. And so I kind of get the feeling that the reader could come back to each chapter again and again and again at intervals, whether it's once a week or once a month or once a quarter, and just reconnect with that aspect of the learning curve, right?
Right. That's the idea. I mean, it's definitely a book that if I've done it well and the reader is engaged with it, that they will want to come back to it and check progress. And so you may a reader may pick up this book and just look at the action steps of every chapter, and that might be your first pass of the book. Or you may start and pick a concept or two in the beginning that's really speaking to you, that's really something that you're curious about and need to work on, and go through each point and take the time to do the reflections in the beginning and read the summaries, go back to the action steps, and maybe from that you take your notes and you go back time and again to measure your progress.
Right. Looking back on the things that I do as a business person at a later stage in my career, I have observed that my profitability and my productivity can be greatly enhanced by very small corrections of behavior. From not looking at the internet until after, my first couple of hours of work, to, answering phone calls quickly, to, all kinds of things like that. So so here's some, some of these seems to be like good basic topics, like good attitude and professionalism. If somebody's never worked in a corporation before, do they know what that means?
Right. Or do they know how hard it can be at times? Right.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I had a guy working for me once who was about 25, and honestly, he kept texting his mother, and his friends too, but his mother. And I was like, "Tell your mother you're at work. I'm paying you for your time." I had to fire him. And I think that it was kind of a shock to him because he was so used to being praised. He said, I'm an award-winning writer. And I was like, you're 25 and you're texting your mother. I was like, I don't care if somebody gave you an award.
Right. And that's a great point, Stephanie, because a new workplace is a new workplace. And so one of the chapters, there's a couple different chapters that get on that subject of professionalism, but also understanding your context and the culture. And understanding your supervisor's priorities and what's important to them. And so that I think the scenario you described about a young person kind of coming in with one mindset, finding out the hard way that it's not going to work and getting fired or losing an opportunity or getting demoted or getting sanctioned, written up or something in the workplace. This happens, unfortunately,
All the time, all the
too
time.
many times, too much.
Yeah.
So with that, that was the spirit of the work is of the work produced in this book. Part of it is how to get ahead, how to be successful, how to really like be mindful, centered on your to be successful for yourself in the workplace. But all that part of it is some pitfalls to avoid. Some things like we just talked about in terms of not letting distractions, managing stress outside the workplace, managing your personal lives outside the workplace to make sure that you can not let that get in the way. And it's not without necessarily explaining every detail of these chapters. I would say to readers watching this or potential readers, it's not just about like firewalling off your personal life outside.
Right.
That may be what you're required to do at certain points, but we're all human. So I think what I've tried to add to the book is context on how to have the conversations with your team members or with your supervisor to manage, whether it could be something that you aren't able to separate. It could be you're having a child. You can't separate that from, you need to tell your
Yeah, right.
company you're having a child. So there are other scenarios where you need to in partnership have dialogue. Oftentimes this is the best solution with your team and your supervisors, and this book talks about how to do that in a way that can have everyone get the best outcome.
And people can love their jobs. This is the other thing. Like, a job isn't like a prison sentence. Ideally, your career should be a source of great fulfillment, satisfaction, a place where you can excel and contribute, and it creates meaning and value. And that's ideal, right? And so early in your career, you want to try to I think keep your mind open to see if the job you've chosen to accept as your first or second job at the beginning of your career, if this is going to be part of your path. What can you learn from it? And sometimes there are skills that are transferable even from industry to industry. And so communication is one of those, right? Once you learn how to communicate, everywhere you go, you're communicating, so
absolutely early and often communication is it's always going to come back to that, and building collaboration or partnership across different team members, different teams, different divisions, and even externally, like with vendors. You want to try to have a good working relationship with basically everybody you come in contact with. It's funny, I was speaking to one of my former students, a current mentee of mine, and asked her to reflect on the book about the concepts that resonated with her so much. And one was just about communication, but also the second half of that is dealing with some conflict which can come up in the workplace around communication. For example, when you're left out of a meeting which you should feel like you should be included in, or someone hasn't replied to your email for days or weeks. She was telling me about a situation where someone hadn't replied for weeks, and she kept seeing that person walking around the office, and not having a dialogue with that person around, why haven't you gotten back to me? So that was really frustrating. But she told me, she's reviewed the work and kind of reflected that having that framework to understand, and maybe I need more information. Maybe it's not me. Maybe the way she resolved the situation was to get a sense of the office culture, which allowed for these things and didn't make it such a big deal. The key to it, though, was that she was coming from an environment where emails were all read instantly or within 15 minutes or 30 minutes. And being in a new environment where that wasn't happening was off-putting, until she had the conversation with colleagues in the office to understand, well, and in this environment, that's okay. And she was put at ease. So really communication and being, again, we go back to the power dynamic, and it's not about like grabbing power from someone else. It's about understanding your own agency and your own power in that situation. She took the initiative, had conversations with people who helped her reassess her feelings and understand that it wasn't so bad after all.
And you know, like you said, it's not about me, right? In that situation, if her feelings were getting hurt, one could start making up stories about it, and then harboring resentments and gossiping with somebody else, and you know, blah blah blah. It goes on and on and on, and all these things happen in offices all the time.
All the time.
It's human behavior. So I think your book also helps people to have a little detachment and look at this in the abstract, you know, because you could be in an office culture that's going to drive you crazy where you don't fit. And you may discover that when you're working somewhere. Like nobody here ever replies, I got to get out of here, go someplace where people are more transparent and connected, you know?
Right. Or vice versa. Maybe you're like, this is too alpha. Everyone is checking their email at midnight every night. I don't want to do that. I don't want to. And so the number one takeaway from the book, I would say, is mindfulness around your career. And then once you start to look and see things, maybe in the abstract, maybe with detachment, but also with your own kind of just honest assessment of who you are, asking yourself to be reflective about who you are, what you want, why you're there in the first place. And hey, we all know the job market is not necessarily always as fluid as we want. So you may be in a situation where you need to stick it out, and it's the best thing for you to stick it out. And this book will speak to that as well in terms of giving you strategies to make the best of situations. And again, not being necessarily passive in just a bad situation, but being active in making the best of any situation.
Yeah, I love this word agency. You have, you know, you are the moving force. You know, you are the driver of your own life. You are the subject of the sentence, not the object of the sentence. You are, you know, and you know, I also in looking at this book, I think that the timing is very good. I was telling you this a little bit earlier. You know, here it is March, and before we know it, all the high school seniors are going to be graduating. All the college seniors are going to be graduating. Yep. And, you know, they're going to be trying to get that first job or the summer job. And if they're not, some are already trying, you know, because they've had their winter internship possibly. And, you know, maybe their load is starting to get a little bit lighter, you know, as they're writing their thesis or whatever. And, you know, and it is a great time to explore these things. And I believe that even though this is not a book about job hunting per se, that if you can answer some of the questions in here, you would have better interviews with people, because you'd be able to articulate to your potential employer. So this would be a great gift, I think, for a parent or a grandparent or, you know, a friendly adult to give to somebody who is graduating.
For sure. I think it'd be a great gift if the school would be gifting it too to their graduates as well, to really arm them. I mean, I think career service professionals, they definitely touch on these subjects, and I hope to add this to the lexicon of resources that can be useful for kids coming out as well.
Is that something that guidance counselors do? They help people to figure out, I mean, I guess guidance counselor is more in high school than in college.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, being in college, definitely the college age students have to be more aggressive and take the agency to go make the appointments, sit with folks. And yeah, but I mean, there are a lot of many skilled professionals throughout the country who would touch on whether it's the job hunting skills or even the career decision skills. My book here is more about once you've taken that first step. So I think I'm adding to I'm almost the caboose in this sort of first train of initial career experiences that the young professional is going to have. But definitely, I appreciate the idea, Stephanie, that, you know, hopefully this could help with the reflective nature of it for job hunters. And or maybe if you are going to make that switch, it helps you see it coming sooner, because you might have taken that first job and maybe it really wasn't where you wanted to be, and you'll figure that out hopefully quicker and not spend a lifetime in a place that doesn't fit you. So
yeah, I think that young professionals in urban areas, I live in New York City, so definitely here, they will get together and create associations and go, and they just go and meet each other and have parties basically and make friends. But when you're job hunting to go to the next level, those are the people you turn to. Is anything open there? You know, who do you know? Who do you work with? But I think that a small group of like-minded individuals in a similar business could also sit down together and go through this as a kind of a reading group. And it's a way of peer mentoring. It could be a way of peer mentoring. It's a way of self-coaching if you don't have a mentor. And I'm a huge believer in mentors. I always get business coaches, and I always work, try to find my next skill mentor, depending on what I'm learning how to do, whether that's sales or taxes or accounting or whatever or internet marketing. I'm always looking for the mentor. So, and I think that that's what people do when, granted I'm in midlife now. So, looking back on, who I was as a new graduate, the world has changed, and it will change a lot, between these graduates' lives and where they'll be in 30 years. Probably even faster than it changed for us, but, being mindful and being able to inquire and reflect and make those choices actively, including the choice to stay because it's a better choice for the moment financially or you don't want a resume, for instance, that looks like you quit your job every 3 months and you never stick to anything, right?
Yeah, you don't want that,
But after 10 years, you might be a little bored. You might want another thing. So, I came out of publishing. And so, I'm sorry, I'm talking about myself, but it's just making me think, I was editing inside the company, and then I was hired by some literary agents to help them with book proposals. And then I became a freelancer working back with the authors again. And then I was an author. So I always say to people, I've been on all sides of that. So sometimes in different industries, like you see it with government contractors. First you work in the government and then you work in supply to the government or or the opposite, So it's fascinating, really. And that is a life, right? We all work, So,
and so let's enjoy it. And so let's make the most of it. Let's do the best that we can. And let's be in a place that is, fruitful for us and productive for the world. And, feeling as good about it as possible and taking as much of the opportunity to make a difference, positive difference as possible. That's what this book is all about.
Yeah, it's a great book. So how did you choose the inspirational quotes that you put in your book?
Oh, great question. Thanks. So the inspirational quotes for me were one way to connect the concept summaries with examples that I felt could resonate with readers. So I was looking for historical figures and contemporary figures, well-known and maybe not as well-known, that could really speak to the concept summaries and would be inspirational to the readers. So there's a whole range of folks in there, from artists like Rihanna to YouTubers like PewDiePie, athletes like Gail Deaver, historical figures, Victoria Osteen is a contemporary sort of inspirational spiritual leader. So there's a whole range of folks in there who I felt would connect the dots for the readers.
I really appreciated that you chose women as well as men and really balanced it. For me, sometimes I read books and it's like men, and I'm like, is the only woman in the world Oprah Winfrey? Because that's the only one, it's like, we admire her, we love quoting her, but come on, there's got to be another woman worth quoting.
She's not the only one.
And
thank you.
Yeah, for me that's really good, and I really did enjoy them, and then I think the final element was the affirmation, the daily affirmations. How do you imagine people will work with those? So here's let me give you an example. So this is setting goals with a clear vision of success, and it says, I work hard toward my goals every day. I am focused on my success. I minimize distractions along the way to achieving my ideal life design. How do you imagine that somebody will use that every day?
Well, the affirmations, I don't know if people will use them every day. I imagine they could, and that would be great. But what I believe the affirmational part of the book is that a la carte moment when a reader is deciding, you know, I need something extra right now. I need something different. I need something that's going to help me glue all the actions and the mindset which I'm getting from the concept summary together. And I see the folks saying the affirmations maybe multiple times a day for days or weeks in a row, and then it becoming a part of their normal self-talk, their automatic self-talk. Because that's where I felt the affirmational part was gonna have the potential to make one of the biggest differences in the book, because none of this may stick, none of this may work forever if a reader continues to defeat themselves subconsciously. So the affirmational part is a way to unlock any negative conscious or subconscious things that we're saying to ourselves. So if someone feels like they're stuck in their goals and that's not connecting, the affirmation is a perfect thing to do repeatedly, day after day, saying it out loud, saying it in your inner voice. Maybe you say it in a meeting or right before you go into a meeting that you're nervous about. Maybe you say it right when you get back to your desk after lunch. If you feel like after lunch your energy is low or your motivation is low, you find, or say it when you're waking up in the morning in the mirror, like,
oh no, you froze.
Here we go again. You know, so that's, I think.
We're having a slight technical issue with the bandwidth here.
Okay.
You just kind of froze for a second. It's okay. It's okay. We've done really well so far.
Yeah. I gotta run actually.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
It's great.
So
on behalf of everybody who's watching, thank you so much, Kadar. Wonderful book. Again, it's the new grad's guide to workplace success, and dig into it. And you know, I think you're going to find that this is great. This is in Amazon, Kindle, BarnesandNoble.com, other IndieBound, other bookstores can be ordered. And your website is kadarlewis.com, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So we'll keep our eyes peeled for you, and I wish you all the success. Thank you for spending time.
Okay, thank you so much, Stephanie. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Have a great weekend.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.